Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Welcome back to Cutting the Distance. Today we have Chris Parish back on the show. He may be best known for his ability to call turkeys, but has killed some great Midwest whitetails on both public and private land, and I want to pick his brain a little bit. We are actually here today in Kansas at Whitetail Camp. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here. Glad to be at camp with you finally.
Yeah, it's fun. This is my first ever whitetail hunt. So we got to do our first sit this morning. So I'm a bona fide expert at these whitetails already. But no, we want to cold here in Kansas. I don't think you can get much better conditions. It's been warm leading up to this. We're on the tail end of a full moon. Cold snap moved in. It was 15 degrees this morning. So I think
wind chill was between 10 and 13, depending on where you were. And the wind's always going to blow in Kansas. That's one thing guys have to remember here. It's always going to blow. So no matter what, you're going to deal with a 10 to 12 mile an hour wind all the time. So you need to bring clothes that accommodate that. Yeah. Even if it's hot, the wind blows and you still get cool when the sun goes down.
Yeah, true. So no, it was a good first morning. Things are starting to get heating up here, as far as the rut. So excited, but we're going to start this off like the rest of the podcast. I'm going to send you some questions here that the users kind of send us.
Okay.
And if you have questions of your own, please email us at ctd@phelpsgamecalls.com, and we'll make sure to include your questions for either myself or our expert. So the first question we have for you today, Chris, is where do you determine where to set your stands? What information goes into that? And then, I think the easy one's always wind or have multiple stands. But what else are you looking for as far as terrain, vegetation, feed, secondary feed, all of those things and kind of how do you put your plan together? And then this is where a stand needs to go on the X.
Right. So, that's kind of a loaded question too, because it all depends on the timing of the year. So I'll kind of stick to what we're looking at right now. A doe is always the target when it comes to the rut because that's what he's looking for. And she's always going to be in and around food. Now, when she comes into estrus, a lot of that goes out the wayside. He's going to push her off somewhere and they're going to spend 24 to 36 hours, and it's usually going to be in and away from any other deer. They neither one of them want to have other deer around them because he's trying to run other bucks off, and she doesn't want to be around other does and other deer. It's just, kind of the little thing. So, but I'm always looking for those transition areas that are leading from bedding to feeding, and that give me the best opportunity to pinch those deer down and get them inside of bow range. Now, if I'm gun hunting, I'll open that up a little bit. Obviously, I'd still like to be in the woods at that point, but I'll open it up where I can shoot a little longer and have a little more sight to see. But when I'm bow hunting, I want to try to, and you can't always pinch it down, but you can always pick the best inside corner or an hourglass type shape or a shelf off of a ridge or a little area where they're going to cross this ditch line, and it's a real common crossing. It's easy. Deer are lazy like people. They're going to take the path of least resistance. So I'm looking for all those little things to connect the dots with and hang my stand. And I try to hang multiple stands, to be honest with you, if I can, for wind conditions. And sometimes they may be a quarter of a mile apart, only because that quarter of a mile, those are the two best travel areas. But I can go in and hunt one from, say, if I got a south wind, I can hunt the south side. And I try to set it where I can hunt either a southwest or a southeast, so I can take advantage of all southerly winds. Same with a north wind. I want to be able to take advantage of all northerly winds. Those are magic. You don't always find that, but that's the kind of thing that I look for. And then the other big key is just pick out your entrance and exits to those stands and be very cognizant that you can get in there and out of there as easy as possible without spooking deer. It's almost impossible when you're in the Midwest because deer are everywhere. We have a great population, whether it be Kansas, Missouri, all over the Midwest, Iowa, Illinois. It's hard to get in and out of those places without bumping a few deer, but try to be cognizant of it, especially walking in fields of a morning. They're going to be feeding. You're probably going to bust one. It's just going to happen, but try to avoid it as much as possible. And then getting out of there and not going through your food plots at night. If you can exit, stay in the woods, make a loop around. If it takes you an extra half mile to get in and out, it takes you an extra half mile to get in and out, but you will benefit from it if you will use those tactics.
Gotcha. Perfect answer on that one. The second question, what's your preferred weather to hunt in? We may be in it. I know we've been texting back and forth a little bit because you've been, bouncing back and forth, hunting maybe the weekends, long weekends. And, you were getting excited because we were getting some rain last weekend, then getting some wind, and then we were getting a cold streak. So if you had to pick kind of your weather or kind of give us a rundown on what we can expect, what are we going to expect when it's warmer than average and no real weather, and then kind of let us know what your favorite weather is to hunt.
Okay. Well, when it's warm out and you're speaking of the rut, and let's just say you have temperatures that are above 50, let's say 60 or better, it doesn't slow the rut down. People always think, oh, man, the deer are just not going to move. They're not rutting because it's too hot. No. The rut comes around one time a year. Does are going to come into estrus, and they're going to get bred. And your fawns come almost consistently around the same time every year. That means 90% of your does are bred around the same time. It doesn't mean that there's not late does. It doesn't mean there's not early does. There are. But there's a consistent pattern there. So they're going to breed. Warm weather subdues the daylight movement because a lot of it gets done at night. That, or really early in the morning, real late in the evening, and they run all night long because, let's just face it, you wouldn't want to go sit in a blind or on a tree stand with your winter coat on when it was 70 degrees, and they're doing the same thing. But, on the other hand, it's the rut. You can't kill one if you're sitting at the house, so you need to be out there because I've literally, I've actually filmed a friend of mine shoot one morning. It was 73 degrees and it got up to 85, and that buck came in to a snort wheeze and was on fire, ready to go. And it was really early in the morning, but you got to be there. So I always hunt regardless of the weather because you have to be there. My preference is temperatures in the 30s of a morning and warming up to about the mid to upper 40s to maybe 50 degrees in the daytime. Two reasons why. One, it's pretty comfortable to set all day. I love to set all day this time of year because you could just as easily shoot one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon as you could at daylight or dark, and they're going to move all the time. and they're going to move all the time in that weather, all day long. You're going to see some movement, especially if you're in those little hidey holes and those little sanctuary areas where their bucks are pushing those does back in for
and
breeding
they're
purposes.
Comfortable in there.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always, if you got a good acorn crop, you're always going to have some food in around there. And to a buck, food's not so important that time of year. It's the breeding. But if there's food around along with security cover, those does are going to be comfortable in there too. So that's my preferred weather. As far as wind conditions go, one thing that, and I was telling you guys early on, the wind's going to blow in Kansas. It doesn't matter. It's going to blow every day, and you want it to blow a little bit. When you hunt Kansas and the wind is dead calm, you're likely not going to see much go on. Those deer need to have a little bit of wind. They're used to it. They're used to 15, 20-mile-an-hour winds. They will move in it all day long.
Provides them a little security as they move throughout the day.
Right, exactly. And they're used to it. They deal with it every day of their life here. You get to Missouri and you get a 20-mile-an-hour wind, it subdues some movement a little bit, and you don't see it. You don't see the deer out traveling long distances like you would normally. It's all about what they are used to in their environment. So you're going to deal with wind here in Kansas, and you want it. I like it. I like personally a 7 to 10 mile an hour wind that's steady, because at least you know exactly what direction it's coming out of. You know where it's going. You know what that one spot that you're giving away. That's my giveaway spot. Something gets down there, no matter what I've done to be scent free, I'm probably going to get. There's a good chance, unless I got high skies and high pressure and the thermals are rising, I'm going to wind up getting busted. So, that's what I like. 20-mile-an-hour winds, when you get gusty winds, can be a problem no matter what, because you'll hear it lay. It'll lay and it won't hardly be any wind, and all of a sudden there'll be a big gust of wind. Well, that blows that scent in every direction, blows it down, blows it up, blows it everywhere, and you wind up getting busted a lot more in those heavy winds. But you've got to hunt. You've got to be there. So don't let anything ever keep you out of the woods this time of year.
Yeah, and you hinted towards it a little bit, pressures. As me and Randy were walking to our stand this morning, he had mentioned, we got high pressure, clear skies, and then we saw clouds start rolling in, 9:30, low pressure. Do you have a preference? It sounds like because of scent and wind, you'd prefer a high pressure system. If cold and high pressure?
I would rather have high pressure anyway. You get a pressure that is 30.15, 30.2 and above, and you just wind up seeing more deer on their feet moving. It's just something about that high pressure that they move on really good. Deer and turkey both are a lot like bass. If you're a fisherman, fish key in off of weather fronts, whether it be a cold front coming in, they may feed up heavy just prior to it, and then they go kind of dormant. Or if a warm front's coming in, they change with the pressure. Yep. And deer do the same thing. Say, for example, you have a rain front coming in. Looks like maybe Thursday we got a very small chance for rain. You get that rain front coming in, you can guarantee 24 hours ahead of that rain front, you're going to get deer on their feet, and they're going to be moving really heavy then and feeding up. It's just something that they do. And the same thing with this high pressure system. Yesterday, it was coming in. And yesterday evening, I got here before you guys did, and I hunted. And the deer were on their feet moving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And that just goes to show, as that pressure's changing, those deer are up doing their thing. Right. And so, follows. Guys that only get to hunt, and we're fortunate, we're blessed, we get to hunt a lot more than most people do. The guys that only get to hunt, let's say 2 or 3 weekends, and you can pick your weekends or you can pick your vacation, try to look at that future forecast and figure it out and key in on those key times. I love 3 days before a full moon and 3 days or 5 days after a full moon. Well, we're 3 to 5 days after a full moon now, so we're in great shape. Yep. And the reason why is it just seems like you get that peak activity, that peak roundness of how those deer are moving. And with that full moon coming in November, like it came in the 8th, you can always count on any time around that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, you're going to start to kick off of estrus cycle. Those does are going to start kicking off estrus cycle. So now, you got some does coming in. You got one coming in here, one coming in there. And a lot of times you'll get that one hot doe in your area, and all of a sudden that first estrus cycle, and you'll be $5 on her, and you get an opportunity at sometimes deer you don't even know exist.
Yeah, showing up out of the woodworks.
Exactly.
Never on camera before. So, yeah. And just touch on it. This is my own question. I'm assuming, similar to elk, those more mature does come in first, and then it kind of is that, oldest to youngest. And then, some of those, young does won't come in until late November, middle of December.
I've seen it in January. I've literally seen when we used to have a doe season in January years ago in Missouri, and I have seen some of the biggest deer I've ever seen on their feet then, because they're still looking for that last remaining doe. And that's one thing a lot of guys don't quite understand. They think the rifle season gets over with and everything's done, when in reality, if you've got a good food source, that late December hunting can be awesome, because those big deer are still looking for some does coming in, and they're keying in on food too. So they're keying in on food and does, and now you got the best combinations, kind of like early season where they're keying in on food and it's bed to feed, and they're real predictable. They get much more predictable after the rut. The rut's phenomenal, but in reality, it's the toughest hunting there is, because they can be anywhere at any time and come from anywhere at any time, and they don't even know what they're doing, But it's also the time that you go, oh Lord, where'd that deer come from? And you see that 200-incher and you're like, I didn't even know that deer existed. Well, he didn't. He was 2 miles away yesterday, and he followed this doe and he ran her.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit this morning. Hunting during the rut, like you can have trail cams and pictures and bucks that show up routinely day after day. And a big buck was killed in camp this morning, and there's always this question like, he's gone, because it's a rut. But the same thing, you could have a picture of a buck that was at a spot yesterday, and he could be 2 miles away, and you don't know. And that's that gamble. You're just like hoping that your best information is leading you to the best spot, but you don't know if that deer's now ran 3 miles off chasing a doe somewhere.
Exactly that, and that's the hard part of the rut, but it's also the magical time because it exposes more deer more frequently. And I think that's the part that I enjoy. I love to hear them grunt, love to hear them, watch them chase, love to watch them do their thing. It's kind of like a gobbling turkey, I mean, if he gobbled and spit and drum, I don't really have to shoot him. I just want to watch him.
Yeah, you got the experience. No,
just the opposite with deer. I want to shoot the deer.
Yeah, and I think that's what drives us to, the same thing, the same reason I love elk hunting, with the bow. You get to call those things and interact. The same reason we love turkey hunting in the spring. The same reason, today I've got to sit half of a day out of a 9-day hunting already, like, watching them respond to deer calls. Like that's the cool part, hearing them make the sounds, us making the sounds, shoot, we rattled and just had a deer, come running straight into the, it's just that being able to interact versus like, rifle seasons and some stuff where you're just, you're kind of just, you're on the sidelines, hoping stuff walks into you. Where
right. A lot of times you're hunting escape routes when you're rifle hunting. You're hunting like, okay, Joe Blow's hunting over there and Jimmy Bob's hunting over there, and I'm going to be right here because everything they screw up is going to come my way. Thing.
Yeah, it's a different chess match.
Hunt smarter, not harder.
Yeah. Once again, if you have your own questions for us here at Cutting the Distance, please email us or send us a message, social media, whatever. Get them over to us at ctd@phelpsgamecalls.com. Now we're going to jump in to my discussion with you, Chris, and I can remember the first time we came out to Kansas. I think you swung by, picked me and Dirk up from the airport. We're going to go turkey hunting, and as we were driving to our place here in Kansas, you started to tell us a story of the giant 8, and I got to spend some time with you probably 5-6 years ago now. I flew out to your house.
I think I killed that deer in 2013 or 2014. So it was probably 2016, 2017.
Yeah, I came out to Chris's place here in Missouri and got to stay downstairs in your basement, and I got to walk by that deer every day, and it was this just giant mainframe 8 with a few little extras, and you have a 200-inch deer, a 200 plus sitting there next to it, and I'm like, this is where numbers don't make sense. Like, not talking down on your 200-inch buck, but I get it. But you set this giant 8 next to this 200-inch deer, and I'm like, that deer's bigger frame, bigger, more massive, everything. So I'm going to let you go ahead and kind of retell that Kansas 8. And the thing that I like about this is it is a public land Kansas buck with lots of people around, and the way you give us some of the insight. I know you had, I want you to really touch on like your entrance to the stand. So, once again, you're not trying to scent the area up, getting away from everybody. It was a lot longer trek. Go ahead and kind of give us the quick and dirty version of that Kansas buck and some of the things that you did that differentiated, what you were doing on that piece of public land to be able to kill a buck like that and everyone else.
Okay. Well, it all started the year before that when I was hunting. Actually, I was hunting Missouri, rifle hunting Missouri. I had permission to hunt some places up here. Then we're pretty close to the Missouri border. If you go right over here, you're near Nevada, Missouri, and some other places. And so I had Butler, Missouri, and I had permission to hunt a couple of places there. So I'd come up and I was staying with a guy over near the Lacing area, and I driving back and forth. I kept seeing some big deer cross the road out of this looked like sanctuary area. I couldn't know what it was. I'm not familiar with the area. So when I got back to camp on like the third day, and I was not seeing anything I wanted to shoot. I was seeing some decent deer, but they were locked down pretty tight, and I just was not being patient like I should be. And I had a cameraman that was not, you know how it can be. Anyway, I went and I asked a friend of mine, Mike Osborne. I'm like, Mike, I said, what is this place over here? I said, I keep seeing some good deer come across that road, and I said, it looks big, but it looks like it's a sanctuary area or a waterfowl refuge. He goes, it is a waterfowl refuge. And I'm like, well, can you hunt it? And he goes, yeah. He goes, there's about 7,700 acres lays in there you can hunt. He goes, it attaches to another 4,000 that you can draw into, which would make 11,000. And he said, then when you get across the river, he goes, there's 4,400 acres over there that cannot and has not ever been hunted. And I'm like, so I guess the people assume those deer never cross the river, you know? And I'm like, that would be an easy assumption, but the wrong assumption, you know? So I started looking at maps, started studying maps, and was pretty intrigued by the place. And I thought, you know, if I draw a tag in Kansas next year, I'm going to just devote my time and hunt that. So I did draw a tag. Planned out a couple places to look, and a couple friends of mine and I, we all drew, and we're all going to hunt together, but we're all going to hunt different areas, obviously. It's big. Well, I had my little spot picked out that I really wanted to hunt, but I wanted to work my way into it. I wanted to figure out kind of what was going on. Didn't realize as thick and heavy and nasty and gnarly as it was, and you could get really deep into it, you know, and didn't realize how much distance there really was. So I came in October the 18th. I really believe I saw this deer about a half a mile from where I wound up killing him at. It was dark, couldn't really tell. Big frame, giant frame deer. You don't see a lot of giant frame deer. Kind of thought he was a Boone and Crockett deer, but wasn't sure, and put it in the back of my mind. I came back on November the 8th, got here on November the 8th at 11 o'clock. By 1 o'clock, I had went back in there and had hung a set where two rivers and an oxbow lake came together and made a big pinch point. And long story short, I ran into a fella on my way out that was pretty close to the edge, and he kind of stopped me, and he's like, hey, bud, he goes, I want to let you know, you go back in there, you're getting close to their bedding area, you're going to push deer out. Well, I didn't want to tell him that I want to be close to the bedding area. Yeah. I want to be in it if I can, especially in the morning, you know, I want the deer to come filtering back in. He said, I appreciate it if you wouldn't come through here the next morning. Well, he wasn't there because I went through there at about 3 o'clock in the morning. He probably hadn't got out of bed yet. And I slipped in there and got in that stand. And how I would enter and exit it, you could walk along the river, and you could walk right down the edge of the river, and chances of you bumping a deer or leaving any scent that is going to be a problem, ground scent, especially if you're going to hunt multiple days, was very minimal. And I had the GPS my way in there because I would have never found the stand without a GPS. It'd be too difficult, you know. So I was 1.8 miles in from where I parked the truck, and I would trek in, and I would just walk a straight line from when I got dead even from my GPS to the stand. I walked a straight line straight to the stand and get in it. I got in it that morning. Long story short, I forgot my rangefinder, forgot my binoculars. I forgot my safety rope and safety vest. So, but I said that safety rope. I had two safety ropes. I just didn't bring my safety vest. So I took one safety rope and put around my waist, and one safety rope and put around the tree and tied it to the tree. I thought, well, if I fall, I'm only going to fall like a foot. I'll be okay. I can just climb back on the stand and be okay. I get in the stand and wasn't seeing much of anything, to be honest with you. I saw a doe and a button buck, and all of a sudden the button buck was bedded down and the doe was gone, nowhere to be found. And I thought, oh, she's coming in. She's left him, and you know, who knows what's going to happen. And about 10:30, I was getting a little bit antsy, and I had a very hard upper respiratory cold, and I thought, man, I need to get somewhere and get some medicine and get this thing knocked out of me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get down at 11 o'clock. I'm going to go to town, and I'm going to go by somewhere, and I'm going to get me some medicine, and I'm going to take a bunch of that medicine, and I'll come back in and climb in the stand. Well, about 10:30, I was looking And all of a sudden I saw this formation of a big giant bodied deer in front of me about 70 yards. And I had a tree in my way, so I moved my head to the left of the tree, and sure enough, it was this deer. And when I first looked at him, I just, in my mind, went 160-inch 8-pointer, and I quit looking, got up in my stand. He comes in, he gets to 22 yards. I hit a little bit of a limb. I liver shot him straight through the liver, went completely through the liver all the way, cut it basically in half, if you will. And the deer hind leg kicked, made a loop, and then ran out about 60 yards and stopped and then took off. And I thought, well, that's his death run. And I wasn't quite sure he was liver shot, but I was pretty sure he's probably liver shot because I saw the arrow, especially the exit of the arrow. And I texted a buddy of mine, and he had just texted me. And I wish I'd have saved that text, because his text was, "Are you seeing anything?" And I said, "Yeah, 333 million blackbirds," because the blackbirds were migrating, and it was just noisy. And he goes, "I've got bucks running everywhere, chasing does and everything." And he's probably a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from me. And I'm like, it's funny how you can be just a little ways apart
off the action,
and all the action's over there because there's one hot doe. And this deer came in the morning of November the 9th by himself. He was looking.
Yeah.
He was cruising. He was cruising. And any rate, long story short, we went back in that evening to try to find him and took blood for about 200 yards. And it was getting dark, and I said, "Let's back out. I'm going to come in tomorrow." I came in the next day, came in from the creek side and walked up the creek all the way, wound up. I knew he was going to go to water. That's typical of a liver shot deer. He's going to go to water. He gets a fever. He's going to, he's not going to go far if you don't push him. And we probably weren't 100 yards from that deer when I found him. And honestly, you don't have this happen very often to you, but when I walked up to the deer, he grew immensely and I thought, after thinking about it, he was maybe a Boone and Crockett type 8-pointer. I had no idea it was a 189-inch deer. He just grew. He's got 42 inches of mass. He's just a giant, really, absolutely a once-in-a-lifetime mainframe 8-pointer. A guy will go the rest of his life and never see an 8-pointer of that caliber.
Yeah.
Just,
let alone
I
kill
was
it.
so blessed and so fortunate. And then, my upper respiratory condition went completely away until I got home. And then I got really sick. I got a fever that night after I got home, and I'm like, well, now I'm really sick. So
evidently, big bucks were the medicine
key.
you needed.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a great story. And to ask an additional question, so public ground, maybe you're getting a little more aggressive than you would, let's say, if it's private. You're getting tight to that bedding, or would you get that tight to bedding even on private?
Yeah, I do. I like to be in that sanctuary of where those deer are moving comfortably and they don't have to go far. A lot of times, a deer will bed down, and if he pushes a doe back in there, they'll bed down. And I've literally watched deer bed with a doe for 6 straight hours and never stand up. And if you're not in that wheelhouse when they do get up and they do move, sometimes they don't make it 100 yards, you're not going to be in that zone you need to be in to get that deer killed. However, you got to know that you can't hunt those places day in and day out. They've got to be key times of the year and key conditions, the right wind, and you go in and you hunt, with the plan of being there, all day long, because if you're not, you could miss out on that 5 minutes that everything happens,
Yeah. And that's like a little bit today. Me and Randy elected to hunt more of the dark timber. And we knew, Randy was telling me, he's like, we probably won't see as many deer as Chris and Dirt, but it was a gamble. We're trying to hope that we're catching a big buck that's, peeling off a doe.
Yep.
He said this, his idea was we probably won't see a lot of deer until 9 to 11 because those bucks are going to want to be out in the feed with the does, checking on them, and then they're going to break off or bring a doe back in here, where he's like, Dirk and Chris are going to see probably more deer because they're out on the food to start with, but then after 9, 10 o'clock, they probably won't see as many. And so I was just kind of curious how much pressure, I guess with the right wind, it doesn't really matter how much pressure you put on that bedding area as long as they're not winding you and making them uncomfortable.
As long as you can get in and out of there without leaving a lot of ground scent. You don't know what goes on at night when you're not there. And the more ground scent you leave, you get 2 or 3 days going in there and leaving some kind of ground scent, they're going to pick up on it. But it doesn't mean that those deer are frequenting it. It's the rut. They're in there today. They're over here tomorrow. They're back in there today. So I think the one thing that the biggest takeaway that I have from it, and I know that there's some science behind all of it, and I get that, but in my 42 years and the good fortune that I've had, the way the good Lord's taken care of me on deer, I think sometimes we get too worried about spooking, bumping, thinking we're going to run that deer completely out of the country. Those deer live there. Yeah, you might alter their route a little bit. You might screw things up a little bit, and all of a sudden they will disappear. They'll be gone. Well, like for example, today, Brian shoots a pushing 190 deer today. That deer they have not gotten that deer on camera in 2 straight weeks, and they were getting him daily.
Yep.
For 2 straight weeks, they hadn't got him on camera. That deer didn't leave the country. He's just off doing something, probably getting, there's a little bit of a lull period prior to them really starting to travel hard and look for does and try to find those first estrus does. And when that happens, sometimes those deer are going to disappear. They're right there. They're not gone. And they're just not moving constantly in that same area.
It's not my story to tell, so hopefully Brian and Randy don't get too upset with me, but I kind of got to hear, after Brian texted Randy killed the buck, and we were kind of going back and forth, and Brian was hesitant to come up this week because his camera wasn't, producing any pictures. And Randy's like, man, I think he's in there. And come to find out, we got to hear the story from Brian this morning. That deer just he was no longer interested in walking in front of that camera. He was skirting, where the does were, the licks and whatnot. Mm-hmm. He was skirting that area. He was 40 yards off. And now it raises the question, has he been there for the last 2 weeks? He just got to the point where he was just going to wind check areas and he wasn't going to go in front of that camera anymore. So has he been there the entire time? And then it leads on to the question, like, how much you trust your cameras at some point. Like, that deer's in there, you just keep going back.
And sometimes I don't care if it's a silent camera. I don't care what it is. You're in there, even if it's a cell camera, you've left, excuse me, some kind of scent in the area. And the more you do that, the more they will avoid. I mean, they're not going to avoid the area completely. They'll just avoid that particular little spot,
Yep.
And many a times, like I was telling you guys, maybe I was just telling Dirk actually today, and I drove him by where I was hunting last night, and I'm just off of the wheel spot. I looked at it, and I don't know why I didn't recognize it when I first hung the set. And the reason why is I hung it a little early. There was a bunch of scrapes in there on the edge, and I wanted to be able to shoot to the edge in case something came in there and check a scrape. Well, you can pretty much wipe the scrapes out now. They're not worried about that at all. They're checking does. They're not worried about leaving sign. And so yesterday when I was in there, and I've watched several bucks walk this fringe, and I looked and I'm like, there's the tree right there. Literally, if I would have been in that tree, every deer walked within 10 yards of that tree.
Yep.
On the perfect wind side of it. I just didn't recognize that's where I needed to be at the time. And now, if I go back in there and I tweak that, I'll promise you every deer traveling through there, what he's doing is he is scent checking that open pasture and CRP and using the wood line as his travel corridor. And he's scent checking that, and that's why they're traveling it. And people don't think about that. He's left scrapes out here, and does frequent these areas, but he doesn't have to walk out there and take a physical look. He can walk by that. He catches a little bit of the right odor in the wind, and then he's going to go out there and check
We've seen the exact same thing this morning. You talked earlier about ease of entrance and exit to your area. So the spot me and Randy hunted, real easy to get into, right? You come from an open field. You're not really, you're not intruding a whole lot into their area, but we had multiple bucks cruise the fence line that we have to walk over because with the north wind that we had today, he's able to check that entire timber patch without ever going through it. He just walks that fence line, strong north wind, that entire, whatever it is, 200 acres of timber in there. He can check that whole thing in one run and he's off, checking for other does. And so we got the same thing, they've got that line. And like Randy said, it's like, shoot, we should turn the 180 and shoot out the back of the blind the way it's running right now. But we did have a couple of good ones come in, but it was kind of, the light bulb went off, like how a buck is being very efficient, trying to find a doe in because he's like, similar to your situation, run a line, check a big area at once and then keep moving.
Right. He can cover more ground. And that just goes to show you too, that guys, their nose is what they live by. And to fool one's nose is like fooling Penn and Teller. I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. I mean, they just don't miss much, and you got to take all that into account.
Yep. So my next set of questions for you is, what can you get away with? I'm an archery elk hunter. I always joke. My dad told me I was built for archery elk hunting because you're allowed to make noise. You're allowed to be clumsy. You're allowed to break sticks. I come from a family that rifle elk hunters where they hunt in their white New Balances so they can feel every stick under their foot. These guys are woodsmen. They're silent in the woods, where it's like I was a little more clumsy. So I always wonder what I can get away with. I've been able to hunt mule deer out of a ground blind before. I've hunted mule deer and elk on the feet with rifles, and you start to learn what you can get away with, what they're going to pick off, when they can see you. It's just kind of, as a new whitetail hunter, I just kind of had some of these own questions, what can you get away with as far as noise? What do you think scent matters, movement, and then kind of walking the trails into an area, because a little bit different hunting than I'm used to. You're going to go sit in one location. You're going to use that wind. So in your opinion, what can you get away with on noise, scent, movement, and your entrance and exit to an area? What will they allow? What will they put up with? And then what can you get away with, I guess, on all those fronts? And I know it's always going to be different, right? But
right.
Give me kind of some generalities on the...
Every area has its, and the thing is when you're hunting public land, sometimes you really don't know exactly how the deer use the area. You kind of can look at the old sign and some of the fresh sign and go, well, I think they're using it like this. This is logical, common sense, if you will. But that doesn't mean, this time of year one could jump the fence right here by the house and walk right by us. In fact, I've pulled in the driveway and had 150-inch deer chasing doe in the side yard out here, they'll do whatever they're going to do. But in general, scent, particularly out of your stand, when a deer gets downwind of you, you can almost bet you're going to get busted unless you have high pressure and it's midday or up in the morning when the sun's up. A lot of times, if he's close enough, it'll go over the top of their head. Other than that, those thermals start dropping in the evening, you're going to get busted. I mean, if you don't, the good Lord's just telling you you're having a really good day, because it's just hard to do.
And one thing, me and Dirk, not knowing how you guys do it out here in the Midwest, we're do we guys bring bottles? How are we going to, go to the bathroom in the stand? And then one thing kind of amazed me and kind of opens my eyes. It's you guys, we all just pee out of our stand.
Yeah,
it's stuff like that where it doesn't necessarily matter.
You'll get guys that'll look at that and be like, "Oh, you're absolutely stupid. You're crazy." Well, you know what? Coyotes are meat eaters, right? And coyotes pee in the woods all the time. And if it really bothered the deer that bad, well, all of them would be in town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. Now, obviously, if you eat asparagus, things don't smell right. If you're on medication, things don't smell right. Doesn't necessarily mean it smells like a human. Urine's urine, but it smells different. It's your human odor, and most of your human odor, honestly, comes out the top of your head and your mouth.
Yeah, your mouth. Yeah.
And that's the thing that really gives it away. And then, ground scent is another thing. You can wear rubber boots, and I was a coon hunter for years. A buddy and I, we used to coon hunt all the way through high school, and a dog's got, I don't know how many olfactories, and a deer has quite a bit more than that. And you could drop out, you could get a brand new pair of rubber boots, wash them down and make sure they were as clean, the rubber smell was gone. And you could drop your dog out and go make a loop and never have to call for your dog. And pretty soon your dog will be walking your foot track back to you, smelling you. Because, if a dog can do that, a deer can do that real easy. Now, I spray my boots down. I keep my hunting boots clean. I don't worry about whether they're rubber. I don't worry about whether they're leather. I worry about keeping them clean and keeping them as scent-free as I can possibly keep them, but you're not going to eliminate it. So that's why entry and exit is really critical. Trying to keep your ground scent away from where most of the deer travel is. So your example, walking trails. I try not to walk a trail, especially a trail that's getting in and close and might be getting used close to where my hunting area is. Now, if I'm 500 yards off, I may walk it for a little ways and then veer off of it. But I try not to get somewhere where a lot of deer are going to... Now, you get in and around your stand, deer are going to frequent it. You're going to leave ground scent. It's just hard to get by without it. If it's moist out, more deer are going to smell. If it's really dry, like it was a couple weeks ago, You
doesn't
watch
hold.
those deer; they'd be feeding on the acorns you just walk through, and they can't smell anything because it's dry. A dog doesn't smell good when it's dry.
Yep.
I mean, you go.
Yeah.
You ask a good quail hunter; he don't want dry conditions. He
Yeah.
wants moist conditions,
Or-
so his dog can smell those birds.
Or you want the absolute best cat dogs. You go down to the dry land, those dogs that can track dry. It's like those are the best noses.
Exactly.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
So the ideal situation would be to approach not on a trail and then downwind of your stand location for the wind that day. So let's say we have a north wind, your trail should go directly from the south into your stand, and then that's like your best approach, and then ideally not be on a trail. But there are situations where you're just going to I mean, there are situations where maybe you don't have access to the property any other way for your stand location. You just kind of do the best you can, get in there scent free. But
there's a lot of stands that I have that you can't access from the downwind side, and one of them is particularly behind my house. It is a 100% south wind type hunting area. I do have north wind sets hung. So what I do, is I walk straight in the least amount of traveled spot, and I don't have very many acres there, but it's the least amount of traveled spot, and I walk straight in and get into the tree on a north wind with the wind blowing at my back, and I have ultimately my very best hunts on a northerly wind in that place behind my house that I ever have with a south wind. And I think it's because those deer can scent check when they come through there everything that is coming from the crop fields. And it's easy for them to do that. I have way more travel on a north wind than I do a south wind. And no matter what the conditions are, no matter whether it's a rut, no matter whether it's early season, it doesn't matter. I always have. So I risk it. And I think that there's certain times that you need to risk it. If you know a deer is there and you know there's a chance, a very minor, even if it's a minor chance that you can get by with it and get in there and possibly get a shot at that deer, take that chance and go to it.
It's worth not being in there at all.
Exactly.
Gotta,
You know, you use an elk hunter, and I'm a peon elk hunter compared to you and Dirk. I mean, I've killed some bulls, and they've all been on public land, but you know, I didn't understand I was always standoffish, didn't want to get aggressive, and then when I started getting aggressive, I started killing elk.
Yeah.
And I started killing decent bulls, and that's when I realized that, you know what? I'm going to apply the same tactics to elk that I do to turkey and that I do to deer. And Dallas Miller, a good friend of mine, if people knew him and knew of him, he has killed a lot of big deer in his life. I mean, astronomical amount of big deer in his life with bow and gun. But he told me one time, he goes, the reason why you're killing so many upper end deer, you know, Boone and Crockett type deer, he goes, is because you're not scared to spook them.
Yep.
And I'm not, because I only get so many days a year to hunt. And when you only have so many days a year to hunt, you need to hunt. And I'm not going to do stupid stuff, but I will take that chance just to see if I can get by with it. And so many times it's worked out.
Yep.
And so, you know, again, don't be ignorant about it, but take that chance, because, you know, sometimes taking that one chance, you get a 170-inch deer on the ground or a 150-inch deer or the biggest deer you've ever shot in your life. It was worth every bit of that chance.
I'm a firm believer, like there are times where the right decision is to be a little more conservative and play it safe. But, you know, as cliche as it sounds, it's like that high risk, high reward. You know, if you don't take a little bit of risk and gamble a little bit, and if you always play it safe, then you're never going to kill anything, versus like, yeah, it might not always pencil out, but there's a good likelihood it will. And so you take that risk with a little bit, you know, and a lot of times it does pencil out, but then there are some times you're also accepting the fact that it might not pencil out, you know, a few times.
Well, and you have to know that in your mind. You mean, it's kind of like investing money, right? You know, or it's kind of like starting a business. It's like, well, you know, I can do this. I might not win. Yeah. But, you know, I might win too.
Yeah.
So,
or I won't have any regrets. Like the other thing is, like the guy that doesn't ever do anything and doesn't kill anything, like, man, should I have went in there and tried it? Well, at least the way we hunt, you're probably not going to second guess it, because you're going to.
And I explained that the other night when Randy said, no, we're going to be hunting on stands. You know, when he was talking, you were talking about, if I see one, can I spot and stalk it?
Yeah.
You know, I have made the mistake by not taking the chance with a giant bedded with a doe and getting down and slipping in, knowing full and well I could get by with it and never get busted, and could have killed big deer that way, but talked myself out of it. And I should have taken the risk, because at least I would have known. Yeah. Now I go, I think I could have, Well, I don't know that, but I should have taken the chance.
Yeah. Yeah. All good points there. Now that we're in the middle of the rut, or the rut starting, I wouldn't say middle. We're kind of getting into the peak of the rut.
Yep. Beginning stages of
the beginning of the peak. Yep. What's your focus right now as far as food? Are you looking, if there's food plots in the area, are you looking at that secondary food? Kind of, how are you going to use that food to your advantage? Because obviously we've established, like, bucks have one thing on their mind right now. They're real dumb and they're just looking for does. They're trying to breed as many does as possible. With that in mind, how are you focusing on food? Are you sitting on primary food sources, secondary food sources, and how do you use those to your advantage?
You know, a big deer will follow a doe down I-70, and you'll see a lot of them dead on it now if you drive down through there. But I don't particularly during the rut like to be right on the food source. I like to be just off the food source. Now, if you have a lot of acorns, you're going to be in the middle of the food source, so to speak, all the time, you know, and they can get up and walk 5 feet and feed. But let's say there's a primary food source. Say there's a 10-acre food plot or a cut bean field, a cut corn field, whatever. That's what I would consider primary food source. That's where most of the deer are going to go feed at some point in time, whether they're there early in the morning or they're there in the evening, or they slip out in the middle of the day and they go back, whatever. I like to be in that transition and those funnels or those pinch points leading from the core bedding cover. And let's say bedding, meaning I don't know if that buck is really bedding in there or he's got a doe pushed in there or what, but it is a bedding area leading to that, maybe 50, 75, 100 yards off of the main food. I just like that because I catch more movement And I feel like, again, I can catch those deer transitioning and scent checking and probably have a better chance of getting him killed than waiting for him to make a mistake and follow a doe out into that food source. So I would rather be there than I would be right on the food. Now, some people don't like to. They like to be on the food because they like to see more and they like to see a lot more deer. But I'm hunting for 1 or 2 or 3 particular type of deer, or maybe I am hunting for one particular deer that I know exists, and I know he's in the area, and I know I've got a better chance of getting him killed there than I do on the edge.
Yeah, and a pinch point where he's got an entire 20 acres of ag to deal with. You're like, all right, he's got a specific path he's going to come, so you can narrow that down.
Right. Especially with a bow. I mean, with a bow, you're talking a short range weapon. Honestly, 30 yards is really probably your key. 30 yards and in is your key. And at that point, you've got to get a deer in a position where you can get that kind of a shot. You get on the edge of a field, a lot of times, he comes out, misses you 70 yards, starts running a doe around. Well, you just got to hope and pray that doe decides she's going to run right by you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works. Now, if I'm sitting there with a rifle,
it doesn't
not
matter.
a problem. He could come out 300 yards away and we're probably going to have a little tap dance going on. But, with a bow, I try to narrow it down and give myself the best opportunity to get that up close and personal shot. And, I was thinking the other day, out of all the deer that I've harvested over the years, probably on a buck, the longest shot that I've ever made is 34 yards, and 90% of them are killed anywhere from 7 steps to 18 steps, and that's what you're looking at. And you're not shooting those. Most of those shots aren't being taken in an open field situation. They've been taken in the woods where he's got to walk by you or in that transition area to get there. And that's what I like. I like that up close and personal action. I like to see his eyelashes.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense versus, being out in that open ag versus, like I say, really trying to pinch him down and get tight on him. So right on the front end of the peak of the rut, let's talk calling whitetail deer strategy. We've got our brand new line of calls out. It seems like all the research I've did, I've talked to you, I talked to Randy, I've talked to hundreds of callers. Like, what do you guys prefer? What sounds? It sounds like the majority of you guys use grunts, but kind of walk through, how you rattle, when you grunt, when not to grunt, when not to make calls, and kind of just your approach to interacting with these deer, during the rut.
Yeah. Well, I'm always going to have a grunt call. And as you stated, you guys came out with your line of deer calls, and I think it absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, I've been using deer calls for the last 40 some years of my deer hunting, and I've called in a lot of deer over the years. And it is key to know when to call, when not to call. I'm not much of a blind caller. Especially in situations where deer can get downwind of you pretty easy, because a lot of times you'll grunt and you'll put a scenario together. Let's say you grunt a little bit, you snort wheeze like 2 deer came together, you rattle, a deer 200 yards down the hollow hears you. He decides he's going to come, but he's going to make a big loop and come in and get behind you. He wants to scent check what he can't see. Well, at that point, unless all the stars line up, you're going to get busted.
Yep.
Right? So I don't like to blind call a lot unless I'm in a position where it's almost impossible for a deer to get downwind, or if he gets downwind, he's had to walk by me to get there.
Yep.
So only in those situations will I do that. Now, if you're in a blind situation where you've got everything closed up, and even if the wind is wrong and you do circle downwind, a lot of times you're not going to smell you through that blind. So you can kind of get by with it. I also like to compass that with a deer decoy a lot of times, because in an open area, like I've got a place just off of a power line. Well, they can come out on that power line 200 yards away, and even if they wanted to circle downwind, they get a look at that decoy. Okay, that changes everything, right? That whole perspective now, they've got a visual of what they thought they just heard, just like a turkey looking at a decoy in a field. Then they come up there and they head on it, and it makes it a little bit easier. But a deer that say you got a deer that's missing you, that comes out and they're going to miss you by 70 yards. That's where that deer call will absolutely pay dividends a lot of times. If he's by himself and he's looking and he comes out and you get a visual on him and they're going to miss you, and they're in a position where they have to almost cut the corner and walk dead around by you to get downwind of you, I'm going to grunt at him. But a lot of times I'll wait too and let them get in position. So let's say you got a north-south wind like today, and the wind's coming straight out of the north, and you've got a deer that's basically crosswind of you, so he's straight east of you.
Yep. Walking to the west.
Walking to the west. If I think he's going to obviously get to me, I'm not going to do anything. But if let's say he starts veering south, I'm not going to grunt to him. Because if he starts veering south and I grunt to him, I'm just going to entice him getting behind me and getting downwind of me. But if he starts veering north, I'm going to let him get starts veering north, I'm going to let him get out north just far enough that when he does want to come and circle downwind, he's got to cut that corner, if you will, as a figure of speech, and he's going to get too close before he gets downwind. I'm going to get a shot.
Or waiting long enough. Like if he stays on his perfectly east to west line, you wouldn't want to call too early because that now gives him enough time to get behind you. Versus if you wait and let him, maybe let's say 50 yards is the right number. He's now out in front of you far enough. At least now if you blow a call, the angle he's going to take, he'd have to walk backward, backtrack to get back behind you or downwind. So you just wait until the right time, not necessarily blow the call
Timing
early.
Things are critical like that, and I'll give you a little example. I shot a 8.5-year-old 6-pointer. It was actually a little bump of a 7th point that made him legal. But I killed this deer, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I'd hunted him for a long time. And I shot him on October 22nd on a kind of a drizzly day, 50 degrees, and that goes to show you 50 degrees with a northeast wind at about 15 mile an hour will freeze you to death. I didn't wear enough clothes that day, kind of like you guys did this morning.
Yeah. We didn't wear enough today.
So this deer came out, he chased a doe, and then the doe left him, which is pretty common October 22nd. He came out and started making a scrape. Well, I let him get pretty into that scrape. Now, he's nowhere near being able to get downwind because the wind's coming this way, coming out of the northeast, and he is north and a little bit west of me. Not far west, but definitely just straight north of me, about 120 yards. And he's making this scrape, throwing dirt everywhere. Well, I let him get in the middle of making that scrape, and I just I grunted hard at him. And he wheeled around and looked, and then turned around and just started ripping that scrape apart. And I'm like, okay, he's aggravated. So I grunted again, and he just started balling up and stiff-legged and starts walking like he's going to walk this half circle. And I'm like, he's going to have to get all the way over there. So at that point, instead of waiting, I didn't elect to grunt again. I snort-wheezed at him to get a little more aggressive. Now, we're in CRP. I'm up in a tree, so I can see in the CRP good. You get on the ground, you can't see what's making the noise.
At him, yeah.
So I snort-wheeze at him, and he pins his ear back and just comes straight at me, and I shot him at 12 yards. But that was perfect timing of the calling, knowing I can't let him get any further now, because if I do, it's just going to entice. He's going to get downwind of me. But if I do it now and he does react, then he's going to cut that corner, and I'm going to get him shot before he gets to a point where he literally read the script. Now, that's an 8.5-year-old deer that nothing in the woods in North America is any smarter. He has seen it all, done it all, been there, and avoided getting shot for 8 years of his life. That is saying something, with especially thinking about the 8 seasons of gun season he went through in Missouri where you had the Orange Army.
Yeah.
That to me, although that deer wasn't no big high-scoring deer, he was old. He was a beautiful deer. He's a great deer for a 6-pointer, and a big-bodied deer. But to beat a deer on his own terms like that, to me, is just that's what hunting deer is all about. It's not always about the size of the deer. Yeah, it's cool to kill those 170, 180-inch deer. They're awesome. It's great. We all want to do it every year. But realistically, only a small percentage of those deer ever live long enough or have the genetics to get to that caliber.
Yeah.
You got 300 deer on your property and one ever makes it there. Well, that kind of gives you an idea of how many actually get there.
Yeah, and then we talked about it a little bit, and we've even kind of alluded to it this time, is the times we won't call, the times we won't hit that grunt or snort wheeze is when that buck is locked down on a hot doe.
Yeah.
He's already got what he wants. He's not going to leave her to come find some buck that's 80, 100, 150 yards off of her. So that's kind of, or if the woods are just if the action's there already, you'll just kind of stay quiet. But if you,
I mean, it's like turkey hunting. You know, if you don't have to call, there's no reason to call. You know, and there's a good time to do it and a not a good time to do it.
And there's also, I mean, same with elk, same with turkey. There's times where you don't want the critters to know your location. You don't want them to look your way and draw any more attention. So
right, exactly.
And we seen that this morning. You know, there were times to call, and then when stuff was moving, we knew we didn't want to draw any more attention or screw up the wind. So that's a good point on when to be quiet.
I this morning I grunted at that deer that was following that doe. And he was a shooter buck if he would not been broke up. He was definitely a big, mature 5.5-year-old deer. I mean, biggest body deers I've probably ever laid eyes on. He was a giant of a deer and a deer that needed to be taken out. It was a big mainframe 8-pointer that's broke up. But the cool thing was he was following that doe, and I knew what kind of reaction I was going to get. But he was 100 yards, 120 yards away. And I had deer in front of me. But I had everything closed up except for one window because I was sitting in that redneck of Randy's,
Yep.
And I'm not good about setting in blinds simply because I can't see or hear like I want to,
Yeah.
But I caught this deer, and I thought, well, I'm going to grunt and see what his reaction is, just as I thought, because I wasn't going to hurt anything, And he was following that doe, and he was about 30 yards behind her, and I grunted, and he wheeled around and looked. And he turned and started following her again. And when I grunted at him the second time, he never even checked up. He just kept walking. And I'm like, that is 99.9% of the time what's going to happen when you have a buck with a doe.
Yep.
His interest level is on what's in front of him. Obviously, she was getting close, and he wasn't going to let her get far enough away that he couldn't check up on her.
He was in 99% lockdown mode. There's nothing besides a bigger buck that's going to take.
And I probably walked by him walking out. I mean, honestly, he could have been bedded down in some of that thick stuff, and they'll let you walk right by him. As long as she doesn't get up, he's not getting up.
Well, no, I'm super excited. Like I say, I've never claimed to be a whitetail, but I think I'm going to like this. It's off to a good start already. So we're here in Kansas. We will definitely give you guys an update on the next episode. But I can't thank you enough, Chris, for jumping on here, kind of sharing, what you know about a very, very small sliver. What we only had an hour to cover, but give us a little insight into your whitetail knowledge. And I'm excited to spend the next week here in Kansas with things just heating up. So
I am too.
Thanks for coming on the show, and good luck on this hunt. I think we're going to end up with some decent bucks here in camp.
I do too.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
You betcha. Thank you.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.